Hello, I'm Andrew Pearce, and this is The Daily Show from the Daily Mail newsroom. Coming up, do you like your gas radiators? Because Ofgem, the regulator, want to rip them out of all our homes within 30 years. I want to know who's going to pay for that, and more to the point, who's going to clear up the mess. And talking of a mess, cooking with hay is now all the rage. But don't sheep and cows lie in it. Amicable divorce, apparently it's possible, and there are more of them. The BAFTA's race round, why no black winners yet again. Boris Johnson sets out why he wants a Canadian trade deal. The same thing Mrs May was offered, but is now off the table. But first, the government say they will legislate to stop automatic early release of prisoners after the terror attack in South London. So that terrorist, very recently released from prison, in fact only days ago and under surveillance by MI5, was shot dead after he stabbed two people on a busy shopping street in the middle of Sunday afternoon. Sudesh Aman, 20, was wearing a fake suicide vest when he stole a 10-inch kitchen knife and set upon a man and woman in Streatham, South London. The extremist had been jailed 14 months ago for 13 terrorism offences after he was found in possession of Islamic State recruitment material and manuals containing instructions on inflicting damage to the body with various types of knives and also bomb-making equipment. He was released after serving half of his 3-year sentence. Joining me now is Professor Helen Fenwick, expert in civil liberties and human rights at Durham University, with a particular interest in counter-terrorist law and policy. Professor Fenwick, hello to you. People will all be asking the same thing. How could it be that a man who was judged such a security risk that he had police and MI5 on his tail morning, noon and night was released from prison?
Well, he was, because of the offence that he was serving the sentence for, he was eligible for automatic release after serving half of his sentence. Had he been convicted of a more serious terrorist offence, that might not have been the case. But given the circumstances, as the law stands at present, that was the situation, that obviously it was recognised that he still posed a danger to the public, which is why the licensing conditions were imposed and why he was under surveillance at the time. But as I understand it, from the reports we've read, it wasn't possible to do other than release him.
People will be worrying too, because we know approximately, the Daily Telegraph says today, 180 convicted Islamic terrorists have been released early in the last 10 to 15 years. They're still they're free to do whatever they want in the community. Are they under observation? Are they under surveillance? Have the police got the resources to keep them under surveillance? And more to the point, could, if the government changes the law, put them back in jail retrospectively?
Well, that would depend on exactly, what the terms of the licence were. If they were originally convicted for an offence that carried, say, a sentence of 15 years, and they've only served a certain amount of that time, certainly not the full term, and they were released early, and they are reviewed and considered still to pose a danger to the public at the moment, then there could be provision for returning them to prison, because they could be said, either they could have breached their licence conditions, or alternatively, if the law changes, it could make provision, a clear provision, for them to return to prison.
All right, that's Professor Helen Fenwick, who is an expert in human rights and counter-terrorist law at Durham University. Now, remember to tell your Alexa speaker to play Daily Mail News, and you'll get the latest newsroom live from Mail Plus. And at 5, you'll hear the latest Daily Show. Now, the Prime Minister, in his first major speech of the year, has set out his vision for a trade deal with the EU, saying there is no need for the UK to follow Brussels rules. It's called divergence. The Prime Minister has called for a Canada-style free trade deal, saying the UK would return to the withdrawal agreement if such a deal wasn't reached.
We want a comprehensive free trade agreement similar to Canada's. But in the unlikely event that we do not succeed, then our trade will have to be based on our existing withdrawal agreement with the EU. And let's be clear, the choice is emphatically not deal or no deal. We have a deal. The question is whether we agree a trading relationship with the EU comparable to Canada's or more like Australia's.
The EU's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, says this morning that its ambitious trade deal offer required a, quote, level playing field. Joining me now is Lord Marland, who is chairman of the Commonwealth Enterprise and Investment Council, and he's David Cameron's former trade envoy. Lord Marland, Boris Johnson has struck a defiant and assertive note. Is he learning from the negotiations of Mrs May, where it always appeared to most people the EU called the tune?
Yeah, I think he's opening the batting, as they say in cricket, very sensibly. He's laying out what the rules of engagement are, and he's expecting the EU to respond positively to it. I think there are two things I'd like to add. Firstly, I think most people, one of the reasons why they felt dispirited by the EU was there isn't a can-do attitude out there, and I think it's about time that politicians see what can be done rather than can't. And the second thing, I think, is we mustn't forget that actually we import twice as much as we export to the EU. So there is an imperative, actually, for the EU to do a deal in many ways more so than ourselves. And that needs to be well and truly in the mindset of both parties as they enter this negotiation. But well done, Boris. I mean, let's go into this and be very clear about where we're coming from.
You'll have seen on the front page of the Financial Times today, Lord Marland, that Nissan have indicated that if tariffs are put on German cars, French cars, that they will concentrate their production in Sunderland. Ironically, of course, that was the first town to vote to leave the European Union and possibly transfer their production from Spain and France to Britain, which was, of course, the reverse of what Project Fear told us would happen.
Yes, exactly. A very positive outcome. And of course, you will have seen the Prime Minister's speech at Greenwich today, where he said he wants to open trade negotiations on a multitude of fronts. I've been in discussions with Number 10 on that. And I think that is the right way to go about it. We must start, and of course these discussions have been happening, they just isn't going to start from now, but we should be rightly working with the Commonwealth, working with America and many of our other global partners as to future trade deals. We are slightly obsessed by Europe. It is a small market in terms of world population. It is an important market, but it's quite a small market. And what Britain needs to do is to ensure that it could access the big populous markets of the world and sell our goods into them.
All right, that's Lord Marland. He's chairman of the Commonwealth Enterprise and Investment Council. Now, if you enjoy The Daily Show, please subscribe to us. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Some of you have, and they were rather good. There were one or two that didn't like me. Google or Spotify. And if you want to get in touch, email me at dailyShow@melplus.co.uk or follow us at melplus_. Even Prince William shared his frustration at the lack of diversity at the white-dominated BAFTAs on Sunday night. He's the president, after all, and announced a full and thorough review. Joker star Joaquin Phoenix also condemned the lack of diversity.
I think that we send a very clear message to people of color that you're not welcome here. I think that's the message that we're sending to people that have contributed so much to our medium and our industry and in ways that we benefit from.
Joaquin Phoenix. Joining me now is Emma Powell, the Daily Mail's showbiz correspondent. Emma, are we getting? Is this a legitimate row to have? I mean, no woman director has won for 7 years, no black winner yet again. There were some good candidates out there, weren't there?
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. It is a legitimate row to have because you had all the main acting categories that were all white. All the directors that were nominated were all male. And it's not as if we're lacking in other people that could have been nominated. You know, you had people like Margot Robbie and Scarlett Johansson. They're great, but, you know, do they really need 2 nominations? Yeah. You know, you look at someone like Margot Robbie, she's a fantastic actress. But for Best Supporting Actress in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, when really her appearance in it wasn't anything sort of stand out and out there. But then you've got someone like Cynthia Erivo, who played Harriet Tubman, didn't even get a nomination.
How is remind people listening how the nominations are decided? Who votes for it?
So it's like a jury.
Right.
So, I mean, a lot of people complain about that, saying this is where it sort of comes from. It's those people on that panel who are essentially deciding who it is. But then, which is true, but then you also got to look at in the sense that this should really be starting at the root level, where the film is, who's writing the film, who's directing the films, how many people are able, who aren't white and who aren't male, who's able to get their ideas through and are having their scripts read by these big movie companies.
We've had this row before. Is anything going to come of it, do you think, this time?
I mean, William said there's going to be a full and thorough investigation, but I feel like this is something we hear year in, year out. But I mean, if you've got people who consistently keep standing up, then hopefully we will make a mark, and this won't be a thing that we just become accustomed to every year. And
we wonder if the same thing's going to happen at the Oscars. That's Emma Powell, the Daily Mail showbiz correspondent. Now, coming up, gas central heating is the latest thing to leave environmentalists cold. And there is, after all, an amicable way to get divorced. We talked to an expert about it. But first, what's on TV tonight? Claudia Connell.
Thanks, Andrew. Well, there's a couple of new series that are starting tonight. So let's begin with talking about Baghdad Central on Channel 4.
I say let them come, the Americans. It will mean freedom.
Iraq needs Iraqi policemen.
Men like you, Inspector.
My daughter, she is missing. Sultan! Sultan!
It's the first episode in a 6-part drama that's set in Iraq in 2003. It's after the war, and the US-led coalition is in control and the country is in chaos, and the ordinary people living there are just trying to rebuild their lives. Among them is a former police officer whose daughter has gone missing, and his attempts at finding her lead to his own arrest and his own interrogation. So he has difficult choices to make if he wants to save his daughter. It's actually a really quite slick new drama. It's very watchable. It's like a sort of political thriller and has a really good cast as well. So also new is Inside Number 9 on BBC Two.
Been warned before.
Grandma Snickers.
Unfortunately, she was a flexitarian vegan cannibal.
All bets are off. Inside Number 9.
This is a return. I don't know if people have seen this before. It's a very, very dark comedy, and it was created by Steve Pemberton and Reece Shearsmith, who are best known for League of Gentlemen. Every week, Inside Number 9 features a standalone story with all new characters. And the only thing that connects them is that all the action takes place behind a door with the number 9 on it. Tonight, it's the door of a referee's changing room. It's a big game at the end of the season, and the refs are offered a bung to throw the match. I find the Inside 9 series to be very, very hit and miss, but this opening one is a real corker, actually, and it features David Morrissey and Ralph Little as well.
Thanks, Claudia. Now it's time for our regular city update with Ruth Sunderland, business editor at the Daily Mail. Can the coronavirus really cause an economic meltdown?
Well, do you know, I mean, it's not inconceivable that it could do. I really don't want to get too alarmist here because we don't know, at the moment it's still very much an unfolding situation. What we have seen, so markets have opened in China again after having been shut down for an extended lunar Chinese New Year holiday. And when they reopened, the Shanghai index was down 8%. Now that's a
huge,
really big fall. So the biggest fall in 4 years. And this was despite the fact that the Chinese government had taken various measures to try and calm things down. They pumped a lot of money into the banks for liquidity, looked at interest rates. So all the kinds of things that we did during the financial crisis, they have done to try and sort things out and calm it down. And yet prices have still fallen. Now, quite often what does happen in these kinds of scenarios, and you probably remember, is after a very big fall, there'll be a bit of a bounce back the next day. So we don't know, will people calm down a little bit having seen that big fall? But it really very much depends on the progress.
On how much it spreads. And
exactly.
We've read reports now, somebody's died beyond China in the Philippines. Yeah. That will happen in other countries too, presumably. We've had other crises like this for SARS. Yeah. We had the big problem with all the beef and the cattle we had to slaughter in Britain.
We did.
And I don't think either of those did lasting damage to the economy.
No. So what could be different? Now, one's first instinct in a way is to say, well, what happens with these things is there's an arc. Everyone gets very excited. Then it turns out to be less bad than people feared, and it all calms down. Why might it be different this time? Well, I can't really speak to the medicine involved in all of this. So obviously the numbers of cases are still small, but they're increasing exponentially. I'm not your person for that. On the economy, though, I would make a couple of observations. One is that the SARS crisis was relatively perhaps not as bad, because at that point, China was not such a big force in the global economy.
That's right.
And also Chinese people were not as mobile, and there wasn't the interconnectivity that you have now. So for those reasons, if the virus does progress as feared, it could have a far worse impact on the global economy.
All right, that's Ruth Sunderland, business editor at the Daily Mail. We will keep you, of course, up to date on that story throughout the week here on Mail Plus and on The Daily Show. Now, do get in touch. You email me at dailyshow@mailplus.co.uk. You follow us at mailplus_. Now, what about this idea? Plans to rip up gas central heating from every home in the country have been unveiled by the energy regulator Ofgem. It says the nation's going to have to change the way it heats its homes to meet the government's target of net zero carbon emissions by 2015. The proposals will largely be paid for by families and businesses, adding billions of pounds to bills over the next 30 years. Joining me now is Dr. Jonathan Marshall, Head of Analysis of the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit. Dr. Marshall, the first question I have to say is, how will they ever enforce this?
Well, there's quite a few ways of doing it. So, for example, if you're selling a home or renting a home, there can be a certain standard to show that you're not still heating your home from gas.
Right.
They can remove products from sale from the market, like they have done in the past when the government decided to ban non-condensing gas boilers to make sure that the sale of old new boilers were as efficient as possible. And if eventually the gas network is dismantled and turned off, then there'll be no other option but to heat your home from an alternative source.
And does it mean physically the radiators and the boiler have to be ripped out, or is it just the switches turned off so that the gas is no longer heating the house, and then we use an alternative? It's a green wire plan, isn't it?
Well, there's a few sort of competing ways of how we're going to do it. Some people advocate using hydrogen instead of natural gas, and hydrogen doesn't have any carbon in, so when it's burnt, it doesn't create carbon dioxide. And if that's the case, you can convert a boiler or install a new boiler, and then keep the rest of the kit the same.
Right.
There's other technologies such as heat pumps, which basically suck heat out of either the air or out of the ground outside, and then concentrate it into a stream, and then goes around your house and then heats your homes that way. So you can still use radiators and existing setup on that. Or there's other systems such as district heating, which work well in urban areas and in like large blocks of flats where you have one heat source which pumps hot water or hot air around the whole block into one home, then into another home, then into another home. So there isn't really one fits all answer in terms of decarbonising heat. The way in which we heat our homes will be dependent on where our homes are and what our homes are like.
All right, that's Dr. Jonathan Marshall. He's Head of Analysis of the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit. I still predict that's going to cause trouble, that plan. Now, January isn't called divorce months for nothing. It's the time of year when warring couples, after a stressful family Christmas, don't we love them, are most likely to call time on their union. Unfortunately, it's also the time of year people are strapped for cash. While so-called one-click online divorces have been available for a while, it's hard to know who'll get you the best deal from among the dozens of options out there. On the line to help go through some of the tips in the Mail today on amicable, affordable divorce is Rosalind Beaver, National Head of Family Law at Irwin Mitchell. Rosalind, can we really have an amicable divorce?
Yes, but it does depend on the circumstances. There are those couples who generally have already reached a resolution and can then finalise it by dealing with an online divorce, sorting out their finances. It becomes more difficult when people are, first of all, in shock and not expecting it, and so emotions run high. The current divorce legislation, which hopefully will be changed in the not too distant future, provides for parties to attribute blame on the whole unless they've been separated for 2 years or 5 years. And so you can have an amicable divorce. One of the downsides of not having the intervention of a solicitor is that there may be one party who is more vulnerable, less accustomed to negotiating, those sorts of things. And it all depends, really, on what the overall asset pot is.
Yeah.
And what the financial circumstances are, because the divorce itself is just a vehicle, really, to resolving the other extraneous aspects, such as what's going to happen with the children, what's going to happen with the money. And they're the things that really cause stress and cost.
I would have thought also, I mean, I'd be guided by you. Wouldn't you always want a lawyer to look over the arrangement you've made, just in case it's not legally binding, or just in case your partner that you think you're doing an amicable divorce with has actually pulled a really fast one on you?
Absolutely. I mean, that's why a lot of solicitors' firms offer a fixed fee initial interview, so that even if parties have reached an agreement, there is an opportunity at that point for a solicitor to say, well, this isn't fair. In this country, we have a discretionary system, and what's fair to to them or to somebody they've met in the playground or at a social event might not be something that is suitable for them. And one of the most expensive parts of actually dealing with the process of dividing assets and sorting out the money is actually finding what the asset pot is, what's available for distribution, because you may have an individual who doesn't really know what's gone on. They've left it to their spouse to sort out the money, and they say, fine, it's 50-50, but it's only 50-50 if you know what's there. And so another sort of expensive part of the process is getting to the crux of establishing what is in the pot for distribution. That's the most expensive part.
Indeed. Thank you for that. That's Rosamund Beaver. She's National Head of Family Law at Irwin Mitchell. If only Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt had thought about amicable divorce, would have saved them probably millions. And finally, stables, rabbit hutches, pigsties. Are they the sort of places you might think about cooking your meals? Because hay is the latest cooking trend. One Michelin star chef has decided to incorporate it into his cooking. Chris Horoskova's East London bakery, there are piles of hay in his kitchen. He says it's all in the name of the new food trend where experts are using hay to flavour cuts of meat. Joining me now is our very own Tom Parker-Bowles, food critic for the Mail on Sunday. Tom, I thought pigs and cows lay in hay. Is it going to be very hygienic?
Well, I mean, obviously they're using clean hay.
Are they?
This hay trend,
right?
Well, you'd hope so. If they're going to the stable and picking up dirty hay, I think I wouldn't eat that. Nor you, nor anyone.
Right.
But this has been going on for quite a while. I mean, you could say for thousands of years, using hay to flavour food. But Heston Blumenthal at the Fact Duck, Rennie Redzepi at Noma, they've been doing this for decades. You know, it adds a certain sort of country meadow sweet flavour, I think.
And I was going to say, is it a distinctive flavour? I mean, does it get baked or fried? How does it get cooked?
I think generally that you bake with it. You can either sort of cover it with water and cover up, I don't know, your chicken or your ham, whatever it is, and cook it slowly so the flavour imparts somehow. You certainly wouldn't fry it, and you certainly wouldn't eat it raw, if you sort of mean. It wouldn't be like, oh, yum, here's some hay. But, you know, like anything that's a food trend, it's something, this is, you know, by their very nature, trends are transient. And that means by next week, they would have forgotten about it and moved on to the next ridiculous ingredient.
And we'll have you on to talk about it. You could be certain, Tom. Have you cooked with it? Have you cooked with it yourself?
I haven't. No, I do remember a recipe of Heston Blumenthal's back in the. Gosh, it must have been back in 2003 that was went on for about 12 pages in The Guardian. That was for, I think, salt-based baked chicken. But no, you know, I like the smell of hay. It's a very evocative sort of, you know, late summer smell. But I'm pretty sort of relaxed about eating it, to be honest. It can be nice. I've tried some dishes that were perfectly nice, little taste of summer in there, late summer. But really, you know, if I had to sit and eat a whole menu of hay-flavoured food, I'd be pretty bored pretty quickly.
It'd probably appeal to vegans.
well, you can be quite safe there's one dish that is the hay itself is vegan. I mean, it might have some insects, so I'm not sure where they might stand on that. But if it was clean hay, I'm sure it would be nice.
Wasn't there something called insect flour once? Wasn't that all the rage once? Has that been and gone? Do you remember that one?
Insects have always been this form. People say this is the future. It's sustainable protein. It's cheap. It's plentiful. But I think insect flour wouldn't be quite to everyone's taste the same as, say, wheat flour or many other more normal kinds of flours. In insects, when we run out of meat, perhaps we will have to turn to insects. But at the moment, it just seems on a nice. It's a nice hook, isn't it? We're going to eat insects or hay. I think if we just stick to good old-fashioned cooking, and if you want to go and eat some hay, fair game. But I don't think anyone should be worrying that this is the future.
Tom, I'm waiting for the invitation for that good old-fashioned cooking. That's Tom Parker-Bowles, food critic for the Mail on Sunday. So that's all we've got time for today. For the latest from the Daily Mail newsroom, come back every day for briefings at 7 a.m, 12 noon, and of course 5 p.m, where you can listen to me all over again.